Hey, welcome to Art's Corner, sponsored by ISTT. Today, we're going to be talking to Art about something I give him a lot of grief about. Art, when I talk to you about documentation, and I give you grief about it.
That's right.
In the end, I know how important it is. And
Yeah.
know that as a detective, I hated it more than anything. It's probably why I give you so much grief about it. But what are we going to be talking specifically about today?
We're going to talk about reviewing our own internal policies and our own documents. And we're going to talk about why, how often we should be doing it, why we should be doing it, and failures. What happens when you fail to do these things and the long
All
term
right. So,
effects.
would a failure be when you're getting ready to do your quarterly review and all your cases, and you realize you haven't really kept up your notes at all? So you spend like 2 days keeping getting all your notes caught up before your supervisor checks your case notes.
Oh, yeah, Mike. And I was a captain. So I had to do a lot of my personnel's case reviews, especially the detectives, because that's the unit I spent the most amount of time in. And Mike, we're going to make fun of the police for just a second. You ever, when you got your reports from your detectives, did you have the one cop that he'd give you 3 pages on a stolen bike report?
Oh, there's several of those. Several of
Yeah.
those.
And then did you find the officer that gave you 1 paragraph on a homicide?
Unfortunately, many of those.
Right. So that's
More
what we're gonna
more
talk about.
than the 3 paragraphs.
Yeah, yeah, 3 paragraphs on the someone left a bike on their driveway and it got stolen overnight. And meanwhile, that looks like a federal investigation. And then you got a homicide and you get a paragraph. Well, let's not do the paragraph. And there's nothing wrong with the 3 pages on the stolen bike report, except for the fact that, do you need the 3 pages? Are you muddying the water? And is it relevant? Okay. I'll give you an example. I read a report one time from one of my guys, and he put in the report that one of the witnesses' wives, one of the witnesses, that man's wife, had a favorite ice cream or something, and he actually put in there that the witness went to the store to buy his wife ice cream or something specifically that she wanted from the store, and we put that in the report, as he was driving by the scene. Okay, that's great, but I don't know, the wife of a witness, her favorite ice cream or whatever it was, that's not anything we really need to capture. Let's not waste our time on that, and let's get to, hey, what was the car description you saw the suspect in? That's more relevant. You see what I'm saying, Mike? Have
Yeah,
you had those kind of reports?
I've seen them. I've seen them several times. So, kind of speaking of time, how often do you need to have these
Uh,
done?
It all depends on what we're talking about, and like I said, this is a large HIPAA itself is a large subject, and we are only hitting the high points and giving people an understanding of how complex this can get, and that's why you need good IT help. You need to have an annual review internally, no less, of your own policy and procedure manuals. So, first of all, do you have a policy and procedure manual? And if you don't, that's step number one. And then why do we want to review it? Mike, I was our accreditation manager uh, at Franklin, and
So,
you're
explain to people what that is. If people don't know what accreditation manual.
okay. So, accreditation through Kentucky Association of Chiefs of Police means that an agency has been audited. They've had a internal survey. They've had officers come down from other agencies or maybe retired officers and basically go through your police department. A lot of it is policy and procedure, and it's also proving it. Example, Mike, an easy one. Prove to me that your officers can put in for vacation. I have to show them a blank vacation form and then prove that we actually use it and just grab one of the officers' vacation forms and I put that in the manual. Well, for HIPAA, same thing. We're doing an annual, we're doing quarterly scans internally. Don't just put that in your policy manual. You better be able to prove it. And this is what I've realized is it's no different. It's all about documentation and proving that we're doing this. So we're going to do it internally. We're going to review it, and then Mike, something that we're going to talk about just a second is the need for an external person. And I'll give you an example from us in law enforcement. Mike, how many white collar crimes did you work on in embezzlement that nobody did an internal audit of the company? They were relying on one individual, and that individual was
Probably
doing
just about every. Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
And then how many times did you get a phone call of we found a problem and we need the police? That's how you find these things.
Mhm.
You and I have had many cases. Well, same thing. We're going to review ourselves first, but then it's also necessary. Get someone from an outside source. And you know what? We'll do a podcast on that sometime. We'll get one of my favorite auditors to get involved with this. It is well worth it to pay somebody from the outside to come in and look at your things. Just the same way you and I, when we were cops, what do we tell these people? Get an outside auditor. Well, same thing with HIPAA. Do it internally yourself, then get a third party. And here's the big tactical advantage for this. Someone audits me and ISTT on HIPAA stuff. Happens every year. We get a report, and I like it. People think audits are bad. Audits are not bad. They are good. They help us learn. But the other advantage is I can go to my supervisor and go, you don't have to just believe me that I'm saying I'm doing a good job. Don't just believe me when you're reviewing my documentation that we're doing a good job. Look, someone from outside came in, did a review, and said, you guys are up to par. That is critical. And if something bad does happen, I'm pointing to a report going, we take this very seriously. Someone watches over my shoulder to look at this. No different than police work in reality.
So, what happens when there are failures?
Well, let's talk about what can failure be. Failure is not following your own policy and procedure manual. That's a big one, right, Mike? How many times have we seen that happen in our police careers? Of,
I've seen,
uh,
I've seen a
yeah,
few forms.
yeah, yeah. We might have seen a few forms over our careers of over 20 years. Uh, but so something happens, and now you have an investigation on you, and in your policy and procedure manual, if you have one, you say that you're using product X, Y, and Z, and you're doing this quarterly review of log on, log offs, like we talked about in the last podcast. You have got problems if you can't prove that you're doing what you're saying. Then one of two things need to occur. You need to either start doing what you say you're doing, or you need to change a policy manual. Policy manuals get outdated. People forget to look at them. That's why I always like to use January. It was cold weather. That's when I started going through the policy manual, rereading it. You might have a product mentioned in there and go, wait a second, we didn't change the policy manual. It says that you're using this product for your vulnerability scans. You're not doing that anymore. And Mike, we got to keep our changes in our own policy manuals. We did it with the cities that we worked for and their PDs. You didn't just take the old policy manual, you throw it away. You had to keep it. So let's say, last time we discussed keeping things for 6 years.
Hmm.
5 years ago, my policy manual said I do this. Well, maybe the policy manual from today says I do it this way. I'm okay because 5 years ago, I was doing it the way that policy manual said. So I want to keep each version of a policy manual. We do it electronically now. Hopefully, goodness, everybody's not printing out all, a couple hundred pages all the time. It always used to kill me when the police policy manual. And Mike, the thing wasn't small, was it?
No, it was we were killing trees printing those
Uh,
out, kind of simple. But
we used to joke,
you know why we print it out? Because the policy says we print it out and provide it.
E exactly, and that is a beautiful example, Mike, of your policy manual is not keeping up with the times. We've talked a lot of times about remote working. Have you updated your policy manual on that for your workers? If you haven't, guess what we need to do? And that's a perfect example of maybe our workers were not remote workers, or as many of them as were remote workers. Maybe we need to go back and change that policy manual because, as we've discussed many a time before, we're never going to go back to exactly the ways things were before. We're
Mhm.
going to have more remote workers. We can get a vaccination tomorrow, vaccinate the whole country, the whole globe, and we're still not going to go back to the way it was.
That's true, and so many times we see that, and I know you see it as well, that what's being done is great work, but it's not documented well. Either not documented about what they do, or it's not documented and it's going against policy because policy has not been updated. So you just updating a policy, if you can find a better way of doing things and say, now this tool doesn't work as well as it used to, or there's a new tool out there that works even better. But if you don't document what you did and when you changed it, then if like we said before, if you don't document it, it doesn't happen.
That's right.
So something happens, something bad happens, and I've been involved in many court cases as you have. They can sit down and take hours and days and years to go through everything you've done and nitpick it to pieces. And having something like that out there to say you've done it, you're doing a good job, you're doing it right, but you weren't following policy
That's right.
can
And
be something they hang their hats on.
Mike, you ever been on the stand, went for your notebook, and then had an attorney request you hand it over right there on the spot?
Yep.
Yep. There you go. Oh, you referenced the note. I want to see everything you got there. Once again, that's documentation. Do you think it could be embarrassing to that officer? And we're using that as an example, but same thing in HIPAA of, hey, in that documentation is something that does not reflect well on us. Why are we doing this? Maybe we need to change the way we're doing things. How many times have you been on the stand, Mike, and someone asks you about what day did a suspect tell you something, and that was 5 years ago?
Yep. And you better have it wrote down.
No different. 5 years ago, 5 years from now, I have no idea what tool I was using at ISTT on my vulnerability scans.
Yeah, there's been several times when, and we're talking about testifying, but the same thing goes when you're getting audited, where your documents, your how you document, what you document, really saves you, uh, and helps you prove what you did was right.
Absolutely.
And so, without that documentation, it can be interpreted a number of different ways.
Ab- exactly. I want it when something bad happens, because something always does bad happen in IT. But when something does bad happen, our disaster recovery, I want it to take care of it. But I also want to cover ourselves. So if someone does go asking us questions, I can prove everything I've said. Here, I'll email it to you, and there you go. And that's what we do when we have our voluntary annual audit uh, here at ISTT. Is they want to see everything that's going on. Here's all your documentation. Here's your policy manual. Okay, now prove to me that you're doing this. This is what I give my client once a month or however often, and they can prove a receipt of it. There you go. If you're not doing that, you need to start thinking about why are we not doing that.
Awesome, awesome work, Art. Very few, many people, not many people, I guess, that can make documentation interesting, and you did that today. So I said, good job.
Yeah,
Uh,
Mike, I don't know if all my cops would have agreed with you on that one.
in the end, they'll when things go bad, they will
Yeah,
thank you for it.
yeah, that's true.
Same thing with in the IT and security field. When it goes bad, they'll be very, very grateful. So,
There you
Art,
go.
if someone has some questions about uh, documentation, about how what they need to do, when they need to do it, or need help figuring out their documentation, their help figuring out their audit schedule, how do they get a hold of you and to talk to you about that?
So they can contact me, and then depending on what their needs are, I'll either help them out or I'll get one of our other staff members to help them out. Just call me at ISTT at 270-781-5096, or shoot me an email at amcfadden at isttinc.com. We'll put that information in the notes as well.
Excellent work, Art. Appreciate you today, and we will see you at the next video.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Be safe.